I was in £250,000 debt because of my gambling addiction. By the time someone has even got up for work, I've maybe gambled a month's worth of wages in that time. On the 18th of August 2020, I tried to take my own life. He took a bite, and it was something that he said and the way he delivered it that taught me everything that I needed to know.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time podcast. Today's guest is Harj, and he's in recovery from a gambling addiction. Harj, thanks for joining me.
Hey man, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Rob, and I'm glad because there's not many people in this domain talking about, their gambling addictions with, I think, more rawness, authenticity. So thank you for having me here, man.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I felt the same way seeing some of your content on LinkedIn. So I'm happy that you're here to share, what's been going on. For those that don't know either of us, why don't we go back in time? When's the first time that you gambled and how did it make you feel?
So the first time I gambled, it was just after I finished university in 2009. Damn, that goes back a while. But I just finished up university and I realized that I didn't want to start that career path of going into law. It was a particular place in the UK called Birmingham. I'm not sure if you've ever been there. For any listeners that are from Birmingham, I apologize in advance. It's not the best of places. It's a very simple thing. I was on a night out with some friends, and one of them was like, let's carry on the party in the casino. They give you free food, they give you free drinks. We can just have a bit of banter, as we say in the UK.
Yeah.
So I remember going to the casino and not been to that many in America, but when you go to casino, there's this bit where you go to the front and then you have these concierge people. And the way the casinos work in the UK, you have these double doors, so you don't actually see what's happening. You have to push through these double doors. As I pushed through these double doors, it was almost like walking into Narnia in that sense. And I remember just this feeling of like, wow, like what's going on here? So you almost like catapulted into this whole new different sphere. And I remember walking down the steps and I could hear people laughing. I could hear the noise of the slot machines. I could hear the croupiers. I could hear the blackjack roulette machine. And it was just all these sounds, all these noises, all these feelings that I've never experienced before. And I remember my friends walking down, they made their way to a blackjack table. And for the first, say, 10, 15 minutes, I just watched them, just taking it all in. I ordered myself a drink and I just watched my friends just placing, £5-10, and then one of my friends said to me, like, Harj, why don't you sit? I was like, yo, man, I've never played this before. They're like, it's cool, man, we'll show you how to do it. It's just all you need is take out 10-20 quid, give it to the man, he'll give you some chips, place a couple of bets, and you win. So I remember sitting down, I gave the card person 20 quid, he gave me these chips. If you've ever felt those chips, it's that weird plastic heavy feeling. And I remember just placing my first £5, and what had happened is I spent about 30 minutes. My friends were telling me this is a soft 17, this is 17, this is a blackjack, here's how you double down, here's all these things I've never known about. And I turned £20 into £60 in about 30 minutes. In my mind, wow, quick, easy, free money. That's how I felt when I got that £60 win.
It's interesting that when you were telling it, your friend said, sit down, this is how you'll play, and then you'll win. So yeah. There was almost like an expectation when you sat down at the table that you were supposed to win.
Yeah, I think so. And what happened? I actually won a bit of money. Call it beginner's luck. That's what it might have been. And that's what happened. That beginner's luck still carried on. And my friend's telling me, and I think it was more about the experience as well. I was there with a couple of friends. It's this sort of camaraderie. We're having a great time. We're winning, we're losing. It was lighthearted, but it just felt like a great place to be in because of how I felt at that time.
Sure. And that makes total sense. It was the same way for me. It wasn't in a casino, but it was on the phone and we were all sitting around doing fantasy sports. But it was the idea of doing something together that made it feel fun, right? It was like exciting. It was fun. I didn't feel nearly like that 6 years later when I stopped. But when did things start to ramp up for you after that? When did it get a little bit more intense?
So after that period, what happened was I went out with my friends. We'd go to a casino maybe once every 2 weeks because I wanted that feeling again, right? I found myself then going every week. Then I found myself going every day. And now I'm spending not just an hour in a casino a day, I'm now spending like almost half a day in there. What happened was after I left university, I actually started a company and I sold that company. So I made a bit of change off the back of that. And all the money that I made from that company, I gambled away within 1 year of stepping foot into a casino. Can I be truthful with you? Even that I didn't feel was a problem. I still felt that I had gambling on the reins. I still didn't feel it was a problem, even though I lost, tens of thousands of pounds on that first year. Still didn't think it was a problem. And I remember coming back home, living back with my parents, and I've always been confident in my own ability. So I got myself a really good job. I worked in private aviation. What had happened was I switched the mode from it being a monthly salary as opposed to a monthly income that can fuel my betting. And I think the time where I knew it got bad is when I knew when payday was going to hit. I knew the exact time the money was going to hit. There's one particular time where most people wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get ready for work. I usually set my alarm for 4:30 because in that time I know the money's landed in my account. And by the time someone has even got up for work, I've maybe gambled a month's worth of wages in that time. And I knew it was a problem. I think when it was these damn things, the rise of Vegas in your pocket, the smartphones, it meant I didn't need to go to casino anymore. I didn't need to go to bookmakers anymore. Everything that I needed was at home. So it would consume my day on the way to work. I had auto bets on the roulette, driving to work. I should be focused on the road. I'd get to work. I'd book meetings for myself, but I'm just gambling in the toilets, gambling at work, after work, on the way back from work. I had a wife at that time. I had a wife, and she thought I must have IBS because the amount of time I spent on the toilet gambling, you know.
I got that too.
So for me, I've always known it was a problem, if I'm honest with you. But it was, I would say, around the 2017, 2018 mark, which is almost a decade after I started gambling, right? And that's when I really felt it was, because the bets just, they were insane. I was betting anything from like £1,000 on the nose on a horse race or the football. My thing was roulette, horse racing, the greyhounds, and on the odd occasion, blackjack and 3-card poker.
I want to dive into that, but I also want to take one step back. Did you view the money that you would make from a gambling win in a different way than you'd view money that you earned from your job? Meaning that when I think back, I expected the money from my job to continue, but it didn't feel like I was earning anything. It felt like that was what I had to do. It was my duty. And then the money that I made from gambling was earned because it was earned from my skill or my thought. Did you go through something similar?
You hit the nail on the head. Say in a month, I would be paid $3,500 to $4,000 a month. When I've equated, so my mind would always go back to, well, okay, that's fueling my addiction. But when I've been able to place a £2,000 bet and win £10,000 back off a single bet, my brain is always automatically like, why are you wasting your time working? You're almost like, you treat yourself as like a skilled gambler. You almost tell yourself, look, I know what I did wrong last time. If I did these bets differently, I can learn from what I did. Or I put a bet on that horse, and looking at the ratings, looking at the trainer, looking at the jockeys, I'd always try to psychoanalyze and look at the thingies to make better decisions. So you're right. To be honest with you, I didn't really care about my job. That was just something that's paid me every month. My whole emphasis was, how can I get the maximum win in this thing called gambling? Because I've known, I started off with a £60 bet. Then it was a £100 bet, or I got £100 wins or £500 wins. And now when I've got myself to a £10,000 wins, I have never received a day in working anywhere. Well, changed now, where I received £10,000 in say 10 minutes.
Yeah. It is really alluring, the idea of being able to multiply the money, but we don't really accurately in our heads assess the fact that if we were to play it out 100 times, that 99 times we lose the money, and then that one time we win, we just give it back later.
Most people that have a problem with gambling lose the value of money because their perception and the way they idolize or they look at money is totally different from someone that's either saving it or working it. That's why, when you look at someone that in a gambling, I would be in, say, £50,000 debt. Now, most people would be shaking at the brim. But for me, I'm like, that's cool, man. I've got this. 1 or 2 bets, I know I can make that back, or I can at least put a dent away. So my association with money was, I just didn't value it because I thought, I know that next big win or that next hit is on its way.
When it's numbers on a screen as well, it's like the negative 50,000 in this case, like it doesn't feel like you're looking at $50,000. You're looking at 5 digits on a screen, and you know that, hey, these 5 digits, well, I can work on that with my great ability to pick which horse is going to be faster than another horse. It's like we trick ourselves into thinking we're in a good spot until it gets way too bad. Do you remember the moment where it kind of got too bad to continue with that mindset?
Well, actually, it wasn't me that saw that I was getting too bad. It was actually my wife, and the exact date was the 16th of June 2020. And what happened in 2020? The whole world, not just the UK, went into a lockdown. And because it went into lockdown, I also saw my bets getting a lot bigger as well. I remember coming out my bathroom at about 8 o'clock in the morning. That 2020 here in the UK, we had blistering heat weather. And I remember walking to the bedroom, and it was my wife. She was sort of just sitting there at the edge of the bed, but she was crying. I mean, I've never seen her cry like this before. It quickly turned from her crying to a gut-wrenching feeling, because what I saw was something that I didn't like, and it was a phone in her hand, and it happened to be my phone in her hand. I went from, I don't care about you crying, I'm more worried about what you found, what lies have you found out about. And there it was. She turned the phone around, black and white. She managed to access to my bank account, and she saw transactions after transactions after transaction, not just one or two. You're talking pages and pages, £100, £200, £100, £250, £500, £1,000. I mean, not just for a day, like days, weeks. Part of me wanted to lie, if I'm honest with you, and just say this is a pandemic and this is what's caused it. Honestly, this was my moment to open up. And they say right in the Bible, if you speak your truth, it should set you free. And honestly, that's how I felt. I just felt if I spoke my truth now, I can be free from all the emotional roller coaster that had been going on for the past, say, 12 years. That's when everything opened up.
So up until that point, she didn't have any idea that you were struggling with this?
Not gambling, maybe, but I think the inkling, it's those little white lies. I say white lies, but they're massive, huge lies. It's those, why are we not booking a holiday? Why are we not going out for a meal? Or why are we not buying this? Typically, especially in the South Asian community or South Indian community, men are the one that look after the finances. The mortgage will be paid, the bills will be paid, but then all these other aspects of my wife wanting something but not receiving it, or there'll be a time where we'll be like, oh damn, like we're meeting up with these couple and I've got no money because I've gambled it away. And I'd always make up some story like I've got to work overtime at work, and then there was some excuse. And I think layered on with the excuses, the lies, she had an inkling, but the truth is her family, my brothers, my parents, my friends, no one knew about this hidden addiction or this phase of my life where I was putting on the mask of bravery, resiliency, everything is great, married, house, cars, great job. It's a bit like Stranger Things, right? You've got the upside and downside, and really no one saw what was happening in the downside world. And I just felt like when my wife found out about it, I felt relieved.
I hear stories of like when people's wives or husbands find out about their gambling, they're almost relieved to a certain extent because they often think that they were being cheated on or something was going on in terms of like infidelity in the relationship. What was the reaction following that day? Was there a trust that needed to be rebuilt, and have you been able to rebuild it?
Oh, massive. Any relationship that you can think of is all formed on trust. Before love, first we build trust, then we build love, right? I broke the very fundamental thing that all relationships are built on, which is trust. And I remember that day, I remember my wife saying, you're done, we're done. Get lost. I don't want to see you. Pack your bags. Pretty much get lost. And I remember sitting there in the bedroom and I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? I'm such a fool. For so long, I'm trying to chase a jackpot. And sometimes you get hit in the face with the reality. And that reality was my jackpot was sitting in front of me, but I was so blindsided by my addiction that I didn't see what was happening. And for me, I thought that was it. I'm not going to get to see my 2-year-old son at the time. My wife was also pregnant with our second child at that time. I built this relationship with a person that had always had my back from day one, who was there more than my own family, my brothers, anyone. She was there through thick and thin. As a man, I felt like a failure. I mean, the words I said to myself, I just felt in this depth of darkness that I just hated. And I looked at myself and I just couldn't even see myself and face myself.
I can relate to that feeling to an extent. I wasn't married at the time. I felt that I had just been lying for so long. Even when I was telling people what was going on, I felt the need to almost lie about it. And I was definitely doing some negative self-talk towards myself. Things started to get a little bit better once that Band-Aid was ripped off, but it wasn't right away. What did the weeks following you telling her that look like?
I think if I had to talk about it, it would be the amount of guilt that builds up on you. So yeah, great. I'm relieved. My wife knows about what's happening, but the guilt that gets associated, and that's what people don't prepare you for, is how you feel. And the biggest thing that my wife said is if we are going to work in our marriage and this is going to go the way that we want, you're going to need to get professional help. Part of me was still fighting that with my ego, and it was like, nah, I've got this, I don't need help, I can do this. But the reality was I needed help, and I did get professional help, but unfortunately it was the wrong one. Layered on with the guilt and not feeling like I'm getting better, the 18th of August 2020 was the day where I pushed myself with all these, like you're saying, these negative self-talks, this internal dialogue, this shame of not being a great role model for my children, feeling ashamed of what I've done, lying, broken trust, all of these aspects that you have gone through. I saw what it would take to climb out of this hole, and I was not willing to face it. And the easiest thing for me to do was call it a day. And on the 18th of August 2020, I tried to take my own life by putting my car into a central reserve on the M1 in the UK. That was a very, very dark night.
How did your wife react when she found out about that?
She didn't. Well, she knew it was an accident, but she didn't know the intention behind the accident. And the reason for that is because we had a couple of miscarriages before the firstborn, and now she's pregnant with our secondborn. And I didn't want to tell her that because I didn't want that pressure to build up on her and something happens to the baby. So it was only after my boy was born in March 21 where I then decided to say, do you remember that situation that happened? Here's the reality. Part of that is now navigating this new part of relationship, which is maybe her feeling like she drove me to this, and when it wasn't, and it's trying to comfort her, because remember, our actions have consequences for the people around us. Even when I felt like I was doing the right thing, I also then still felt there was a negative consequences to that too. Why? Because surely I'm on the right path, and surely I'm doing the right thing, but it just didn't feel like I was doing the best, if that makes sense.
I can relate to the feeling that you're describing, and I think it's been pretty apparent in the entire story that you've told that you put a lot back onto yourself, and you try to take all the battles and try to find all the solutions yourself, and when the solutions aren't going well, then it causes another problem and you blame yourself. I did the same thing. Do you feel like that contributed to gambling more, to escape the stress of that?
Yeah, 100%. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I think the biggest thing I was told in recovery was gambling was never the problem. Gambling is a byproduct of something much more deeper. And when I linked that back to my childhood traumas of my dad being an alcoholic, my mum not being home in the house at nighttime because she worked night shift, there was a separation in the house, but then not being guided. And I think part of the lack of self-worth, the need for validation, the need for significance, which is why when I was a young teenager or a young adult, I was always a people pleaser, because I just seek that validation, because it gave me that thrill that I'm a somebody, and it still wasn't enough. And then what gambling gave me was the part that I was missing. So yes, the validation and people pleasing gave me the validation, but the lack of self-worth was still there, and I felt my lack of self-worth was attached to the amount that I won in gambling.
Did you tip a lot at the casino?
When I was winning, 100%.
Because it's sounding like me. I had a similar mindset of like, oh, well, if I win big, then I'm important. When I'm important, everyone around me can be important. And my mom tells me that her dad was just like this. He would always just give people money, like, here, take this, to like please them, to impress them. I was the same way with tips at the casino. So that's why I asked the question.
Going back to what you're saying there, Rob, coming on the other side of this, no, part of that is just how the casino industry makes you feel. They are true masters of entertainment, and they can make the most average person feel like $1 million. So then when you're feeling like that $1 million because you've had that big win, here's a $100 tip, or here's another $100 tip. But when you lose, oh, it's another whole story. Or give me that $25 back chip, or oh, you messed this up, and then you'll do everything to try and scrutinize that casino. Really, it's your own fault, but you're just trying to claw back as much money as possible. When you're winning, you feel great. When you're winning, when you're losing, you're feeling shit. But then, no matter if you're feeling good or feeling shit, it still doesn't matter, because you still feel shitty, or you still feel there's void in your life anyway.
Yeah, I get that. It's a loss either way. It just takes a while to lose when you're winning. When does it start to get better? What kind of help starts to work for you, and what really made it click in recovery?
So the actual day where everything had the catalyst was 2 days after me trying to take my own life. So it was the 20th of August. A certain part of my life was getting very overwhelming. And I remember my son, my 2-year-old son at the time, his name is Jeevan. Everything happens for a reason. And there's a reason why we named him Jeevan. We drove around and we're in a McDonald's and he's got some chips. We're in the drive-thru. And I remember this moment where I'm sitting in the drive-thru. I've passed the chips over to my son, or the French fries. And he took a bite, and it was something that he said and the way he delivered it that taught me everything that I needed to know. It taught me the power of responsibility and dependency. And I realized I was so selfish for such a long period of my life that I had dependence. I had responsibility to take on. I made a promise to myself of necessity that to never let myself down so I can never let my children down. And that was the catalyst for change. And Jeevan in my language means life, or bringer of life. So I always say my son brought me back life, and I managed to get recovery through a phenomenal charity here in the UK called GamCare, and then I was going through it. But this therapist went beyond that CBT. She did a bit of inner child work, and when I was able to unlock these traumas, I started to heal through it. And then once I understood why I was doing certain things, and like I said, not the gambling, why I started acting in certain ways in life. It's almost like Tom Cruise, and he's like putting everything together. Everything made more sense because all the dots are lining up, and that was the catalyst. So then I started working on myself. I started getting better. I started becoming more confident. I started rebuilding the trust with my relationship with my wife. We're now in the most strongest place that we're still together, thank God. We're in the strongest place. I'm building memories with my children. Throughout this whole journey, one thing I didn't tell you, Rob, once we sat down and worked out the finances, I was in £250,000 debt because of my gambling addiction. My therapist also said to me was, people that have addictions also have great addictive habits. Squash the gambling, put that addiction habits into something great, which was entrepreneurship. And then through about 2 years of entrepreneurship, I was able to take my 250K debt, and I'm now debt free. I'm more happier, I'm more fulfilled, and I'm living a true life of purpose.
Man, that's the exact path that I wanted to take with my life. That's just awesome that you've done that. Congratulations.
Thank you, my man.
What did your son say to you that day in the McDonald's?
It's very simple. I don't share it often. I don't share it at all, if I'm honest with you.
You don't have to.
Let me do this, because when someone listens to this, it might give them that change. And all my son said to me was, Dad, I'm so lucky. I get emotional when I talk about that, because it's those little poignant messages, and you expect these massive changes to come from these huge places, right? But they don't. A 2-year-old that just said one simple thing to me changed the trajectory of my whole life. So even a 2-year-old may not say something, but it was more the energy that child gave back to me. It's almost a part of myself looking at myself saying, my own 2-year-old looking at me going, you've got this, you're okay. And that's what he said. And that's why it's so profound, because maybe my life, I just needed someone to say to me was, you're okay, and you've got this.
It's a massive wake-up call for a problem gambler who's chasing after these big wins to fix everything, when in reality, some fries and time with their dad was all the 2-year-old wanted. That's all you really needed.
Or maybe it's what I needed, not him. So
fair. So what do you do now?
A bit like you, Rob, I've really turned my life around. And like I said, October 21 is when I decided I wanted to share my journey. That's when I first published my first video and said to the world, hey, look, I'm a recovering gambling addict, and here's my story. And from there, I just wanted to share my journey, not just the gambling, but more so how it affected my life, my health, my career, my finances, my children, all of these aspects. And I put it all out there on social media. I put it all out there on talks. And the reason I want to do that is because I know that there are people on the other side of this screen that are listening to you, Rob, that are listening to me, going, that's me. I'm in this situation. And if our journey, our stories, and the message that we share, if they can be a beacon of hope and a voice for those that are suffering in silence, then do you know what? We are doing a greater service to humanity than we can ever do. And that for me is what fuels my purpose. So I do stage talks, I lobby in Parliament, so I've spoken at the House of Lords, House of Commons. Not only do I want to help and transform human beings at a humanitarian level, but in order for that to work, I need to do lobbying at a parliamentary level to make those law changes, to really push back on profits over people. You know what I mean? And we're in a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I would call myself an activist, a change maker, as you will. The way that I do it is I tell my story, I share my story, deliver messages. And the biggest message is that, you know what? you're not alone. By having a conversation or just sitting and listening to Rob, myself, you'll be surprised that there are other people out there like you, and that genuinely can, with hope and faith, come out the other end.
So you and I are in a unique position as entrepreneurs where we can't get fired for sharing our story of gambling because we can't fire ourselves. For someone that is working a job that wants to do some type of activism or give back in the problem gambling space, how would you recommend that they make some initial steps to helping someone else?
So there's a couple of ways. So if you're an organizations, whether it's in America, US, wherever it is, they have something called the well-being or wellness programs. And the amount of corporate organizations that I've spoken to, and I will say to them, has your organization spoken about gambling or any other type of addictions? And 90% of the time, no. Well, guess what? Change starts at work as well, because guess what? Your home problems go into work and work comes home. Chat to work and see if you can have those open discussions. Secondly, speak to the people around you that you know you can open up to, because sometimes you might want to push yourself on social media just yet, but can you start instilling a bit more confidence and clarity by speaking to someone that you know that you can just openly speak about anything that you can, and maybe that might give you the little stepping stone for confidence. And then hopefully, if you've been through some obstacle, challenge, or adversity in life and you've come out the other end and you have got the tools and resources to help someone. And there's a Brené Brown quote that always sticks with me, which is, the problems that you go through will one day become someone else's survival guide. What problems have you gone through, but yet come out the other end, that you can share, that can become someone else's survival guide? And that takes the onus away from them, and it starts saying to that person, I now have a duty and responsibility to maybe share my story, or if I see someone in the comments that have a problem, I can respond to them and hopefully spark a bit of change. So there's so many different ways, and one of those, just take one of those little olive branches and then see where that seed plants and see where it grows.
Yeah, you never know what kind of an impact you can make by even talking to one person that's going through it. You know, you don't have to put yourself on blast on social media and say, hi, I'm Rob and I'm addicted to gambling to 1,000 people, but you know, like, talking to anyone could make an impact in their life. A good amount of the people that view my content come from countries like India and also towards like Indonesia, Malaysia. Is gambling culture very big in South Asia?
Yes, it is. It's like anything, you know, religiously, you're taught not to gamble because it's a sin. But when you're in areas of deprivation where money is not accessible, the industry knows this and they basically ramp up the advertising. So then what happens is you'll find that it's not so much the casinos and not so much the online space. It'll be more of those local bets where it could be chicken fights, dog fights, dice in the local street, or peer-to-peer betting. When I've been speaking to people from, like you said, from the Philippines or India, or even Africa, typically that's what happens here. If it is the casinos, it's usually more the local bookmakers that take that money and they're owned by local gangs, and then they fear that whole thing. So it's a rising problem in those places, and that's because of lack of money. And the way the gambling advertising is now being shown out there, and not just gambling advertising, but content creators and influencers, they're using this mechanism with the parasocial relationships. They're saying that gambling is a way to make money, and that's what's being seeded in them. When they're losing more than they can earn or afford, that becomes a problem.
How do you combat that as an activist?
It's the yin-yang approach. For every negative, there's a positive. So for every message that's a negative out there, we have the same tools, we have the same resources as any other person. It's the mindset that we have. And I think that comes down to me owning who I am. If my mindset was always a case of, damn, I can't do this and nobody will listen, guess what? My message will never get out there. But when these people are using YouTube, social media, and they've got access to Google and all these other fantastic places, my journey is, where do I get the biggest amount of voice so I can get the biggest amount of reach? And it comes down to lobbying, activism, sharing, but not singularly. I think what you need to do is we need to create a team. Me, you, Rob, you know, other people that are in this space that are, I wouldn't say anti-gambling, because I'm not anti-gambling ads, but I'm anti-gambling harms, which can talk up with lived experience. And if we have this unity, a bit like the Avengers, if we can have our own Avengers team where we can come together and we all have our own superpower, but yet we have the same mission and vision, then I think that's where the real change happens, because now we've got people that have been through it, have ever come out the other end, and are showing a different story to what the narrative has been spun from the pro gambling side.
Yeah, it's kind of breaking down the myths that the marketing is propagating, which is that gambling is a way to make money. That was made super clear to you when you were doing your gambling, that you were supposed to lose. Would it have stopped you?
Do you know what? No, because there was a void in my life. Remember, gambling was never the problem. I had a void in my life that I hadn't completed or acknowledged or healed. And no matter if I didn't heal that, there'll be something else. So it was gambling and alcohol. They were my two biggest ones, and never drugs. So until I started healing that thing, yeah, I'll be honest with you. Even if they turned around and said, you will lose a lot of money if you gamble, I still would have done it, because I would have clung onto that hope.
I almost think the solution is making people aware that a gambling problem is not a financial problem. Because if you understand that, then it doesn't matter if you think you're going to win your next bet, because then even if you win, you have all these other problems in your life that are unattended to. Do we try to convince gamblers that they're going to lose, or do we try to tell people what happens if they keep going regardless?
Me personally, I've tried to be a bit more honest about, remember, like I said before, it's not just about the gambling. How does it affect your finances? How does it affect your career? Because I'd always know I'd find my way, because I did it with gambling. So I can do it with business, or I can do it with relationships, or I could do it with whatever it is. So what I put my mind to, I think about how I did it with gambling at the biggest jackpot win. So why would I not do that in life?
People in recovery are like hardwired to be really successful if they're able to channel that into anything productive. I see just like a lot of young people, specifically like young men who are in college, reaching out to me, and they're like, man, like I can't do anything else except gamble. Like I'm gambling for 10 hours a day. And I'm like, dude, if you're able to sustain 10 hours of energy on something a day, you're going to be a millionaire if you can just point it towards something good.
Focus isn't the problem. It's what you're linking that focus to that's not giving you the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah. And if you're used to getting this big thrill from what you're focusing on, like say that you're hyper fixated on gambling, the idea of focusing on doing like coding or deep work on a business, it doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't feel like you'll be able to transition that. And so it's not like you just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're Bill Gates, but the idea of being able to find something you're super interested in, just be patient with it in recovery is what I tell people, because you're not going to find it right away.
My question to you is, what do you feel has been the biggest hurdle in your recovery journey?
If I was to think about the biggest hurdles that I've had so far, I'd probably say there's been two that have been pretty significant. The first is overcoming this feeling that I'm behind. Because of the gambling, I felt at a certain point that, you know, my friends were progressing in life. They were doing well. Everyone seems to be doing perfect. And when we go on social media, that's kind of reiterated, because it's kind of an echo chamber of everyone's highlight reels. And so in the beginning, when I first stopped gambling, I was like, man, I have nothing. I have no purpose. I have no direction. I'm behind everyone. So I was like dragging myself back down to the point where I wanted to gamble to get away from that feeling. And so it was really important to try to find some type of purpose, even if it didn't give me that same thrill in the beginning. And I found that through the content that I've made. So that's been really helpful for me. The other one is this idea of separating out different types of gambling in my head. When I first stopped gambling, I knew that the casinos were rigged. I wasn't going to make money on that. I knew that sports betting had a house edge. I wasn't going to make money on that, but I really struggled to stop with buying options in the stock market, because it wasn't that it had a natural house edge. It was, why can't I beat this? This is one that if I study it, I should be able to win, right? And it was this false belief that I kept going in my head so that I could keep getting that thrill. And it wasn't like I was buying options to protect my assets. I was buying an option 5 minutes before the Federal Reserve meeting to see what kind of big swing the market would take. So see if I made 500x or 500% or zero. So really separating them out in my head kept me mentally trapped, where I was constantly looking at the market and thinking, man, why didn't I just go and invest? It's investing, it's not gambling. So I had to overcome that.
A lot of us, especially in the gambling world, talk about it, but in other addictions they do. Have you ever relapsed? And if you haven't, what would you say to someone that has potentially relapsed?
Well, since I first tried getting into recovery, I relapsed. Yeah, that was on November the 12th, 22, which is when I made my last bet. I spent 12 hours on a gambling binge where I put myself into debt for the next 6 months. And what I would tell someone that has gone through a relapse is you have kind of two options. Option number one is to just keep beating yourself up, which is going to lead you right back to the same problem again when you use that to try to fix everything you've done. So in gambling, we think, if we're down money, we can fix it all by gambling more, which is just such a messed up thought. Your other option is to take what happened to you and use it in a positive way. And it sounds like the cornier option, of course, but realistically, if you go back to gambling because you were feeling bored, well, now you know that every time you feel bored, you want to gamble. So you need to plan ahead of time. What will I do when I feel bored? If you go back to gambling because you had too much money sitting around, you go, okay, well, this money tempted me. How can I put this somewhere else so that I'm not tempted to spend it? Use what the triggers were, what sent you back, to inform your plan for the next time. Because if you don't, you're just doomed to repeat the same cycle.
My common response to that is relapse is part of any recovery journey. So what I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to get people to beat themselves up about it. But I always ask them, if you take yourself out of there, what did you learn about that relapse?
Yeah.
And then once they've learned, they go, hold on, there's power in this. And then the only time it can become a problem if you continue to keep relapsing.
Yeah.
And that's when we might have to take it in a different scenario. So understand that relapsing is okay and it's part of the process, and try not to be too hard on yourself. But also, whenever you go in these always remember just to take a moment out of it and just say, look, I've come this far. I do it every time. I do it every other month. I say, what have I learned in these past couple of months that I haven't learned in other months? And it just fuels this purpose and vision even more. Yeah, I always say that with the relapse part, just understand that it's not the end of the world.
100%. Is there anything that anyone could have said to you during the time you were gambling that would have made you stop?
It's hard. It's always hard to say what's in hindsight, right? But the truth is no. And I feel that the universe works in a way where it's meant to happen at that time, not a moment before, not a moment after. I had to go through what I went through so I can learn from what I went through and serve with what I went through. Who said it? I think it was Denzel Washington. He goes, first part of life is you learn, second part of life is you earn, and the third part of your life is you return. So I'm in this weird second and third part of my life.
That's awesome. Harj, thanks so much for being on. If anyone wants any information about him and the activism that he's doing, then check the description of this video to find that. And if you're interested in hearing a story about a woman who's recovered from gambling addiction, then check out this video. And let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.